I'm Sarah Mitchell, 32, and I stood frozen in my home office staring at my laptop screen as my husband David's LinkedIn connections systematically destroyed my professional reputation with their cruel comments on our anniversary post. What had started as a simple celebration of our 5-year marriage had turned into a digital nightmare that would expose the toxic underbelly of Austin's tech scene and ultimately lead me to take the most calculated risk of my career. When I decided to contact their CEOs directly, I had no idea I was about to uncover a web of workplace harassment, professional sabotage, and corporate cover-ups that would change everything. Before I continue with this story, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from today, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notification sound had been innocent enough that Tuesday morning in March. Another like, another comment on the LinkedIn post I'd shared celebrating David and me at our anniversary dinner the night before. We looked happy in the photo, genuinely happy, toasting with champagne at Uchi downtown Austin while the sunset painted the sky behind us through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd written a heartfelt caption about partnership, growth, and building dreams together. Standard anniversary social media fare, nothing controversial or overly personal. But as the day progressed, the comments section became increasingly hostile. It started with Amanda Foster, a senior developer at TechNova Solutions who worked closely with David at industry conferences. Her comment seemed friendly on the surface but carried an undercurrent I couldn't quite place at first. So sweet that some people still believe in fairy tales, followed by a laughing emoji. Then Brian Thompson from Digital Dynamics chimed in with David's really committed to the bit, isn't he? Followed by more laughing emojis from Amanda and several others I recognized as David's professional contacts. Lisa Park from Innovate Tech added fuel to the fire with some people will do anything for attention these days. Marriage posts on LinkedIn, really? The likes on these mocking comments were piling up faster than the supportive ones, and I watched in real time as my professional network began to fracture along lines I hadn't even known existed. These weren't random trolls or strangers, these were established professionals in Austin's tight-knit tech community, people whose opinions carried weight in the industry circles where I'd worked so hard to build my reputation as a marketing director. The cruelest comment came from Amanda again, this time with surgical precision designed to hit where it would hurt most. Poor Sarah, posting marriage content on a professional platform because she can't make it about her actual work. Some people peak in their personal lives when their careers stall out. We've all seen the type. The comment received 12 likes within an hour, including from people I'd collaborated with on major campaigns, colleagues I'd considered allies, even a few individuals from my own company, Pinnacle Marketing Group. I sat in my home office in our Westlake Hills neighborhood, surrounded by the vision boards and marketing awards that had once felt like symbols of my success, now feeling like hollow decorations mocking my naivety. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like the fragments of my professional confidence floating away. David was still at TechFlow Industries, completely unaware that his connections were systematically dismantling his wife's reputation one comment at a time. What hurt most wasn't just the public humiliation, though that stung deeply enough. It was the realization that these people had been harboring these opinions about me for months, maybe years, and I'd been completely oblivious. How many networking events had I attended where they'd smiled to my face while internally dismissing me as David's wife who'd gotten too big for her britches? How many professional opportunities had I lost because of whispered conversations I'd never heard? The post had over 300 views by late afternoon, with the negative comments heavily outweighing the positive ones. My phone buzzed constantly with screenshot messages from friends and colleagues, some offering support, others asking if I'd seen what was happening. The hashtag I'd used, #PowerCouple, which had seemed cute and appropriate that morning, now felt like a target painted on my back for everyone in Austin's professional community to take aim at. I called David around 4 o'clock, my voice shaking despite my attempts to sound calm. "Hey, have you checked LinkedIn today?" I asked, trying to keep the devastation out of my tone. He was in meetings all afternoon, he explained, and hadn't had a chance to look at social media. His casual dismissal of the platform that was currently hosting my public execution felt like another small betrayal, though I knew it wasn't his fault that his connections had chosen to attack me rather than him. "Just check it when you get a chance," I said, not wanting to explain the full scope of the disaster over the phone. The anniversary post is getting some interesting reactions. I hung up before he could ask follow-up questions, needing time to process what I was going to do next. The professional Sarah Mitchell, the one who'd built successful campaigns for Fortune 500 companies and earned recognition in Marketing Today magazine, would have crafted a diplomatic response or simply deleted the post to minimize further damage. But something deeper was stirring in me, something that refused to accept this level of public disrespect without consequences. These people felt comfortable mocking me because they assumed I was powerless, just another spouse attached to the tech industry rather than a professional in my own right. They'd calculated that their behavior would have no real repercussions, that they could safely punch down without fear of retaliation. That calculation, I decided, was about to prove catastrophically wrong. I spent the evening researching each person who'd participated in the comment pile-on, diving deep into their professional backgrounds, their company hierarchies, and most importantly, their leadership structures. Amanda Foster worked for TechNova Solutions under CEO James Harrison, a man I'd actually met at a Chamber of Commerce event the previous year. Brian Thompson reported ultimately to Margaret Stone at Digital Dynamics, a company that prided itself on its inclusive workplace culture and had recently launched a high-profile campaign against cyberbullying. Lisa Park's company, Innovate Tech, was led by Kevin Chang, who'd given a TEDx talk just 6 months earlier about the importance of ethical leadership in the digital age. The irony wasn't lost on me that these companies publicly championed values that their employees were actively violating in their treatment of me. But more importantly, I realized that these CEOs had no idea what their employees were doing under their company's names on professional platforms. By the time David came home that evening, I'd compiled a comprehensive dossier on each company, their stated values, their recent public commitments to workplace respect and digital citizenship, and the contact information for their executive leadership teams. David walked into the house around 7:30, his face already grim, from what I assumed was his first look at the LinkedIn disaster. "Sarah, I am so sorry," he said immediately, dropping his laptop bag and crossing to where I sat at our kitchen island surrounded by printouts and notes. "I had no idea they felt that way about you. I'm going to talk to each of them tomorrow and demand they apologize." His protective instincts were admirable, but his solution felt insufficient for the scope of the problem. These weren't schoolyard bullies who would back down when confronted by a friend. These were seasoned professionals who'd made calculated decisions to publicly humiliate me, and they'd done it because they believed there would be no meaningful consequences. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but I think this requires a..."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Different approach. I gestured to the research spread across our granite countertop. These people attacked me professionally, used their company affiliations and industry positions to undermine my reputation. They chose to make this about business when they brought it onto LinkedIn. So I'm going to respond in kind. David looked at the papers more closely, recognizing company logos and executive names. "You're not seriously thinking about contacting their bosses, are you?" "Sarah, that could backfire spectacularly. These people have influence in the tech community. If you're seen as someone who can't take criticism, who runs to authority figures when things get tough, it could damage your reputation even more." His concern was valid, but it missed the fundamental point. "They already damaged my reputation," I replied. "The question is whether I'm going to let them get away with it, or whether I'm going to hold them accountable for their behavior." These companies spend millions on public relations campaigns about respect and inclusion. Their employees just violated every principle they claim to stand for, and they did it publicly, on a platform where their company affiliations are prominently displayed. I pulled up Amanda's LinkedIn profile on my laptop, pointing to her job title and the TechNova Solutions logo prominently featured beneath her name. When she posted that comment, she wasn't just speaking as Amanda Foster, private citizen. She was speaking as Amanda Foster, senior developer at TechNova Solutions. Her behavior reflects on her employer, and her employer has a right to know how their brand is being represented. David sat down across from me, still looking skeptical. "But what if they don't care? What if they just see you as a troublemaker, and it makes things worse for both of us?" It was a risk certainly, but one I'd calculated carefully. These were publicly traded companies with reputations to protect, brands that couldn't afford to be associated with workplace harassment or professional misconduct. More importantly, they were led by executives who'd built their careers on principles of ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. "Then I'll know exactly where I stand," I said. "And more importantly, so will everyone else in this community." If these companies choose to protect employees who engage in professional harassment, that's information other people deserve to have when they're making decisions about partnerships, collaborations, and career moves. I spent that night crafting 3 carefully worded emails, each tailored to the specific CEO and company culture I was addressing. These weren't emotional rants or personal attacks. They were professional communications that laid out the facts, included screenshots of the offensive comments, and requested information about company policies regarding employee conduct on professional platforms. I cited their own corporate values statements, their public commitments to workplace respect, and their recent initiatives around digital citizenship. To James Harrison at TechNova Solutions, I wrote about how Amanda's behavior contradicted the company's stated commitment to fostering inclusive industry relationships. To Margaret Stone at Digital Dynamics, I highlighted the irony of an employee engaging in cyberbullying behavior, while the company was actively campaigning against such conduct. To Kevin Chang at Innovate Tech, I referenced his own words from the TEDx talk about ethical leadership, and asked how Lisa's actions aligned with those principles. Each email was professional, factual, and impossible to dismiss as emotional overreaction. I wasn't asking for anyone to be fired or demanding specific punishments. I was simply bringing their employees' behavior to their attention and asking how it aligned with company values. The ball would be entirely in their court regarding how to respond, but they would no longer be able to claim ignorance about what their employees were doing under their corporate banners. David read the emails before I sent them, his expression shifting from concern to something approaching admiration. "These are really well written," he admitted. "Professional, factual, not inflammatory. You're giving them the opportunity to do the right thing without backing them into a corner." He paused, considering. "I still think it's risky, but I also think you're right that their behavior was completely out of line. If it were happening to one of my colleagues, I'd want to know about it." I sent the emails just after midnight, wanting them to arrive in executive inboxes first thing Wednesday morning, when attention spans were fresh and the workday priorities were being set. Then I did something I rarely allowed myself to do. I took a sick day from Pinnacle Marketing Group. I needed the mental space to prepare for whatever responses might come, and I needed to be available if any of the CEOs wanted to discuss the situation directly. Wednesday morning arrived with typical Austin unpredictability, unseasonably warm weather, giving way to sudden thunderstorms that seemed to match my emotional state. I sat in my home office with coffee and my laptop, watching for email notifications while trying to distract myself with industry publications and market research. The LinkedIn post was still accumulating views and comments, though the conversation had shifted slightly as more people became aware of the controversy. Jessica Chen, my closest friend and the HR director at her own company, had reached out the night before after seeing the post. "Girl, what are you planning?" she'd texted. "I can see those wheels turning, and I know that look means trouble for somebody." Jessica had been my voice of reason through countless professional challenges over the years, but she also understood better than most the importance of standing up to workplace harassment in all its forms. The first response came at 10:15 Wednesday morning, and it wasn't what I'd expected. Kevin Chang's assistant called my personal phone number, which I'd included in the email signature, and asked if I was available for a brief conversation with Mr. Chang at 11 o'clock. My heart rate spiked as I agreed, suddenly realizing that my calculated risk was about to become very real very quickly. Kevin Chang called precisely at 11, his voice warm but serious. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I want you to know that I read your email very carefully, and I've spent the morning reviewing the LinkedIn thread you referenced. I have to say, I'm deeply disappointed in what I found." He paused and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Lisa's comments were completely inappropriate and absolutely contrary to everything we stand for at Innovate Tech. The conversation that followed was surreal in its professionalism and directness. Kevin explained that Lisa would be suspended pending a full investigation into her social media conduct, and that the company would be implementing additional training around professional platform usage for all employees. He also asked if I would be willing to participate in a broader conversation about industry standards for professional networking behavior, potentially as part of a panel discussion at an upcoming Austin Tech conference. "I want to be clear," he said before ending the call, "that Lisa's behavior doesn't reflect our company values, and I personally apologize that one of our employees contributed to your professional harassment. This isn't the kind of community we want to build in Austin's tech scene." By the time I hung up, I was simultaneously elated and terrified. The response had exceeded my most optimistic expectations, but it also meant that word would spread quickly through the industry about what I'd done. The second response came via email from Margaret Stone's office just after lunch. She requested a video conference for Thursday morning to discuss not only Brian's behavior, but also broader questions about corporate responsibility in the digital age. The third response was the most surprising. James Harrison from TechNova Solutions called Wednesday evening while I was making dinner, catching me completely off guard. Miss Mitchell, I apologize for calling during personal time, but I wanted to reach out directly about Amanda Foster's conduct. I've been traveling this week and just saw your email when I landed in Austin an hour ago. I immediately reviewed the LinkedIn thread, and I have to tell you, I'm appalled. His voice carried a gravity that made it clear this wasn't a perfunctory damage control call. Amanda has been with our company for 3 years, and she's always been a strong performer technically. But what she did to you represents a fundamental failure of professional judgment and basic human decency. James explained that Amanda would be placed on immediate administrative leave while the company conducted a thorough review of her conduct, not just the LinkedIn incident but her overall professional behavior and any previous complaints that might have been overlooked. He also revealed something that made my blood run cold. Amanda had apparently been making disparaging comments about various industry spouses and partners for months, using private Slack channels and group chats to mock people she considered hangers-on to the tech community. Your email made me realize we might have a much bigger cultural problem than one inappropriate LinkedIn comment, James said. I've asked our HR team to conduct a comprehensive audit of internal communications and employee conduct on professional platforms. If there are other victims of this kind of harassment, I want to know about it, and I want to make it right. By Thursday morning, I was fielding calls from reporters, industry bloggers, and other professionals who'd heard about the situation through various networks. The story was spreading organically through Austin's interconnected business community, and opinion was sharply divided. Some people praised me for holding bad actors accountable and forcing companies to confront harassment they might otherwise have ignored. Others criticized me for escalating a social media dispute into a corporate crisis that could damage careers and relationships. The video conference with Margaret Stone was the most professionally satisfying conversation of my career up to that point. She spent 30 minutes asking detailed questions about the incident, the response from other companies, and my perspective on what systemic changes were needed to address professional harassment on networking platforms. Brian Thompson, she informed me, had been terminated not just for the LinkedIn comments but for a pattern of inappropriate behavior that HR had discovered during their investigation. Your email was the catalyst we needed to take a harder look at some behaviors we'd been dismissing as personality quirks or cultural fit issues, Margaret explained. Brian had received informal warnings about professional conduct before, but nothing that rose to the level of formal disciplinary action. The LinkedIn incident gave us the framework to address the larger pattern, and frankly to send a message to our entire organization about what we will and won't tolerate. She also extended an invitation for me to speak at Digital Dynamics' upcoming quarterly all-hands meeting about professional networking standards and the real-world impact of online harassment. The opportunity was both thrilling and daunting. It meant stepping into a public role as an advocate for workplace respect, something I'd never imagined becoming when I shared that anniversary post just 3 days earlier. The domino effects continued throughout the week as other professionals came forward with their own stories of harassment and dismissive treatment from the same individuals and their associates. What had started as a personal attack on my marriage announcement had uncovered a network of toxic behavior that had been flourishing in the shadows of Austin's professional community. The 3 CEOs I'd contacted were now collaborating on industry-wide initiatives to address the problem, and I found myself at the center of conversations about corporate responsibility and digital citizenship that extended far beyond my original grievance. By Friday evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing speaking requests and interview opportunities that had materialized seemingly overnight, I realized that my calculated risk had paid off in ways I never could have anticipated. The people who tried to diminish me professionally had instead provided the catalyst for meaningful change in how the industry addressed harassment and misconduct. My reputation, rather than being damaged by their attacks, had been enhanced by my measured but firm response to those attacks. David came home that Friday with flowers and a bottle of wine, his expression mixing pride with amazement. "I have to admit I was wrong about this whole thing," he said, kissing me as he handed over the bouquet. "I thought you were taking too big a risk, but you've accomplished something incredible this week. People are already talking about the Mitchell standard for handling professional harassment. You've changed the conversation entirely." The irony wasn't lost on me that a post celebrating our marriage had led to professional opportunities and industry recognition that might never have come my way otherwise. The people who tried to use my relationship as a weapon against me had inadvertently demonstrated exactly why that relationship was worth celebrating. David and I had built something together that could withstand public scrutiny and professional attack, and we'd done it with the kind of mutual support and shared values that made us genuinely formidable as partners. As I prepared for a weekend filled with planning sessions for speaking engagements and strategic conversations about leveraging this momentum into lasting change, I reflected on how drastically my life had shifted in just 5 days. I'd started the week as a successful but relatively anonymous marketing director, and I was ending it as an accidental advocate whose story was being used to train corporate executives and rewrite employee handbooks across multiple industries. The transformation had come at a cost, certainly. Some professional relationships would never recover from the positions people had taken during the controversy. Some networking events would probably be awkward for months as people navigated the new reality of increased accountability for online behavior. But those losses felt minimal compared to the knowledge that other professionals, particularly women and spouses in the tech community, would benefit from the precedent that had been set. More importantly, I'd learned something fundamental about my own capacity for calculated risk-taking and strategic thinking under pressure. The skills that had made me successful in marketing campaign development translated perfectly to reputation management and crisis navigation. I'd identified the stakeholders, crafted targeted messaging, executed a coordinated communication strategy, and measured results in real time. The only difference was that this time, the product I was marketing was the principle that professional harassment should have meaningful consequences. Looking ahead to the following week, with 3 major speaking engagements already confirmed, and several companies requesting consulting services around digital conduct policies, I knew that my career trajectory had fundamentally shifted. What had started as a defensive response to personal attack had evolved into a proactive opportunity to shape industry standards and corporate culture. The anniversary post that had triggered everything was still live on LinkedIn, now with over 2,000 comments representing a fascinating cross-section of professional opinion about accountability, respect, and the power dynamics that shape workplace relationships. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the simplest one by Sunday evening, when the dust had settled and the immediate crisis had resolved into manageable ongoing opportunities. David and I were sitting on our back patio in Westlake Hills, watching the sunset over the Austin skyline and planning our actual anniversary celebration. The one we'd been too busy managing professional drama to properly enjoy earlier in the week. So David said, raising his wine glass in a mock toast, "Should we post about this dinner too? See what happens." I laughed, the first genuinely relaxed laugh I'd had since Tuesday morning. "I think I'll stick to Instagram for personal stuff from now on," I replied. LinkedIn has provided quite enough excitement for 1 week. But even as I said it, I was already thinking about the strategic possibilities that lay ahead, and how the platform that had hosted my professional crisis might become the foundation for an entirely new phase of my career. Part 2. The Childhood Foundation, to understand how I developed the steel spine that would eventually allow me to take on 3 corporate executives simultaneously. You need to know about my childhood with David and the foundation that shaped both our characters and our relationship. We didn't meet in some romantic college setting or through mutual friends at a trendy Austin bar. Our story began much earlier, in the suburban neighborhoods of Richardson, Texas, where our families lived 3 streets apart, and our mothers bonded over their shared frustration with raising strong-willed children who refused to follow conventional paths. I was 8 years old when the Mitchell family moved into the house on Maple Street, and David was 9. Already established as the neighborhood kid who could fix anything electronic and had strong opinions about fairness that sometimes got him into trouble with adults who preferred compliance over questions. My mother, Linda Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan with my father when I was 3, bringing with her an unshakable belief in education, hard work, and the importance of standing up to bullies, whether they were classmates or authority figures who underestimated what Asian children could accomplish. David's mother, Carol Mitchell, was a 3rd-generation Texan whose grandmother had been one of the first women to own property in Richardson, and she'd inherited both the stubborn independence and the protective instincts that had allowed her family to thrive, despite economic uncertainties and social pressures. When she saw the new neighbors struggling with English language bureaucracy and cultural navigation, she didn't hesitate to march over with casseroles and offers to help, beginning a friendship between our families that would span decades and survive everything from teenage drama to professional setbacks. The first time I really noticed David as more than just another neighborhood boy was during the 4th grade science fair incident that would become family legend, and in retrospect, perfectly foreshadowed our adult approach to handling injustice through strategic action rather than emotional outburst. David had spent weeks building an elaborate volcano demonstration, carefully researching the chemical reactions and preparing detailed explanations of geological processes that impressed even the middle school teachers who volunteered as judges. But when presentation day arrived, Kyle Morrison, whose father was the
School principal and whose mother chaired the PTA, unveiled a professionally constructed robot that clearly required adult engineering expertise and violated every rule about independent student work. The judges, unwilling to challenge the principal's family directly, awarded Kyle first place while relegating David's genuinely innovative project to third place behind another obviously parent-created entry. Most 9-year-olds would have accepted the unfairness, cried, or complained to their parents about the obvious corruption. David did something different. He spent his lunch periods for the next week documenting the discrepancies between Kyle's stated abilities and the complexity of the winning project, gathering testimony from classmates who'd witnessed Kyle's father assembling components in the school parking lot, and researching the science fair rules that had been violated. Then he presented his findings not to the teachers who'd already demonstrated their willingness to compromise their integrity, but to the district superintendent, whose office he reached by calling the main number and politely requesting a meeting to discuss educational fairness. The superintendent, amused by the articulate fourth grader's formal approach and impressed by the thoroughness of his documentation, agreed to review the situation and ultimately overturned the science fair results, implementing new oversight procedures to prevent future parental interference. I watched this entire process unfold from my position as David's unofficial research assistant, helping him organize evidence and practice his presentation to adults who might otherwise dismiss a child's concerns about fairness. Even at 8 years old, I understood that what David had accomplished wasn't just about winning a science fair. He demonstrated that challenging authority required preparation, strategy, and the courage to escalate beyond local power structures when initial approaches failed. My own defining childhood moment came 2 years later during the 6th grade math placement controversy that revealed how deeply embedded assumptions about Asian students could limit opportunities even when disguised as beneficial stereotyping. Despite consistently scoring at the top of every mathematical assessment and demonstrating problem-solving abilities that exceeded grade-level expectations, I was placed in the regular 6th grade math class while several male students with lower test scores were advanced to pre-algebra. When my parents questioned the placement during their first conference with my teacher, Mrs. Patterson, they were told that Asian girls were naturally good at computational mathematics but typically struggled with abstract thinking required for advanced courses. The recommendation was to keep me in regular math where I could build confidence before attempting more challenging material, despite the fact that my standardized test scores in logical reasoning exceeded those of every student who'd been placed in the advanced track. My mother's response to this professionally delivered racism was swift and systematic. She contacted every Asian family in the district, documented similar placement patterns affecting their children, and organized a presentation to the school board that included comparative test scores, research on mathematical giftedness across ethnic groups, and testimony from university professors about the long-term academic impact of early tracking decisions. But the most powerful element of her campaign was the support she'd cultivated from non-Asian families who recognized that arbitrary placement decisions could affect their children too. Carol Mitchell became one of her strongest allies, using her established relationships with other longtime Richardson families to build a coalition that couldn't be dismissed as minority special interest advocacy. The school board meeting where placement policies were challenged became a masterclass in strategic communication and coalition building that would influence my approach to professional advocacy decades later. My mother didn't attack individual teachers or administrators personally, but she systematically dismantled the assumptions and procedures that had led to discriminatory outcomes. She presented alternative solutions that would benefit all students, not just Asian ones, and she made it clear that the entire coalition would monitor implementation to ensure meaningful change rather than superficial policy adjustments. Within a month, I was transferred to the advanced math track along with 3 other Asian students whose abilities had been systematically underestimated. More importantly, the district implemented new placement protocols that required documentation of specific academic deficiencies before any student could be excluded from advanced coursework, regardless of demographic characteristics or teacher assumptions about cultural learning styles.
David's family had supported our campaign enthusiastically, with Carol Mitchell using her PTA connections to gather intelligence about opposition arguments and Robert Mitchell attending school board meetings to demonstrate community-wide support for fair placement policies. The experience created bonds between our families that transcended neighborly friendship and established patterns of mutual support that would prove essential during future challenges. These early experiences taught both David and me that systemic problems required systemic solutions, that individual complaints were easily dismissed but well-documented patterns of unfairness could force institutional change, and that building coalitions with people who shared your values was more effective than trying to shame opponents into better behavior. We learned that authority figures who seemed powerful within their limited domains often crumbled when forced to defend their decisions to higher-level stakeholders who cared about reputation and legal compliance. Most importantly, we learned that strategic thinking and careful preparation could level playing fields that initially seemed tilted against us. These weren't lessons typically taught in elementary school, but they formed the foundation for everything we would accomplish as adults, from our individual career successes to our ability to function as genuine partners when facing professional and personal challenges. Our friendship deepened throughout middle school as we navigated the social complexities of adolescence while maintaining our shared commitment to fairness and strategic thinking. We became each other's primary collaborators on school projects, study partners for challenging courses, and confidants when family pressures or social dynamics created stress that other classmates wouldn't understand. David's approach to problem-solving complemented my natural instincts for research and coalition building. Where I tended to gather extensive information before taking action, he excelled at identifying key leverage points and pressure tactics that could accelerate change. Where he sometimes moved too quickly toward confrontation, I provided the patience and diplomatic skills necessary for building sustainable alliances with people who might initially resist our objectives. By high school, we developed a reputation among teachers and administrators as students who could be trusted with leadership responsibilities but who wouldn't hesitate to challenge policies or procedures that seemed unfair or counterproductive. We were elected to student government positions not because we promised popular but unrealistic changes, but because our classmates knew we could actually deliver meaningful improvements to campus life through strategic advocacy and systematic problem solving. Our romantic relationship emerged gradually from this foundation of mutual respect and shared values, beginning with a first kiss during junior year that felt less like a dramatic shift than a natural evolution of the partnership we'd been building for years. We'd already proven we could work together effectively under pressure, support each other through family crises, and maintain our individual identities while functioning as a collaborative team. When college application season arrived, we made decisions independently but with full transparency about our reasoning and priorities. I chose the University of Texas at Austin for its marketing program and proximity to emerging tech industries, while David selected Texas A&M for its engineering reputation and cooperative education opportunities. The 4-hour distance between campuses was manageable for weekend visits, and we both recognized that experiencing different academic environments would strengthen our individual development and ultimately enhance our partnership. College tested our relationship in ways that revealed both its durability and its flexibility. We supported each other through academic challenges, family emergencies, and the inevitable attractions and temptations that come with newfound independence and expanded social circles. We learned to communicate across distance and time zones during David's cooperative education assignments, to celebrate each other's successes without competition or jealousy, and to provide honest feedback about decisions that might affect our shared future. More importantly, we continued developing the complementary skill sets that would prove essential when we eventually faced professional challenges as adults. My marketing studies enhanced my natural abilities in strategic communication and stakeholder management, while David's engineering training reinforced his systematic approach to problem identification and solution development. We spent summer breaks working internships in Austin's growing tech corridor, building professional networks and gaining experience with corporate cultures that would shape our career trajectories. The decision to get married immediately after graduation wasn't driven by external pressure or romantic urgency, but by practical recognition that we functioned better as a team than as individuals, and that formalizing our partnership would provide stability and focus as we launched our professional careers. We'd already proven we could weather stress, support each other's ambitions, and maintain our individual identities within a collaborative relationship. Our wedding was small and practical, reflecting our shared values and our family's emphasis on substance over appearance. Carol Mitchell and my mother had become genuine friends over the years, bonding over their children's unconventional approaches to problem solving and their own experiences navigating cultural expectations and gender roles in professional settings. The ceremony took place in the backyard of the house where David's grandmother had once defied social conventions to pursue property ownership, with decorations created by both families and food representing the diverse cultural traditions that had shaped our upbringings. The early years of our marriage were marked by the typical challenges of career building and financial management, but also by continued collaborative approaches to obstacles that might have divided couples with less established patterns of mutual support. When David's first job at a major tech firm turned toxic due to a supervisor who seemed determined to undermine promising engineers, we approached the situation strategically rather than emotionally. Instead of simply encouraging David to quit or endure the harassment, we documented patterns of behavior, researched company policies and legal protections, and identified internal and external resources that could address the systemic problems affecting not just David but several other junior engineers. The campaign we developed ultimately led to the supervisor's reassignment and implementation of new mentoring protocols that benefited entire cohorts of early career employees. When my own career hit obstacles related to age and gender discrimination in marketing departments dominated by older male executives, David provided both emotional support and strategic assistance in identifying alternative career paths and building professional networks that would value my skills and perspectives. His connections in the tech industry opened doors to collaborations and opportunities that might otherwise have remained invisible, while my marketing expertise helped him navigate office politics and stakeholder relationships that engineering training hadn't prepared him to handle. By our 5th anniversary, we'd established ourselves as a formidable professional partnership while maintaining our individual career identities and personal interests. We'd purchased the house in Westlake Hills through careful financial planning and strategic career moves, created a home environment that supported both our professional ambitions and our shared values, and built a social network of couples who shared our commitment to fairness, strategic thinking, and mutual support. We'd also established patterns of communication and decision-making that would prove essential when external challenges threatened our reputation and professional standing. We'd learned to discuss problems immediately rather than allowing resentment to build, to seek input from each other without surrendering individual autonomy, and to present a united front when facing criticism or opposition from people who might try to divide us or exploit perceived weaknesses. Most importantly, we'd proven to ourselves and our families that our childhood friendship could evolve into an adult partnership capable of withstanding professional stress, financial pressure, and social complications without losing the mutual respect and collaborative spirit that had originally brought us together. The foundation we'd built through shared experiences of standing up to unfairness and supporting each other through challenges would soon be tested by circumstances we couldn't have anticipated when we shared that anniversary post on LinkedIn. But that foundation held firm because it had been constructed carefully over decades, with each challenge we'd faced together strengthening our confidence in our ability to handle whatever obstacles might emerge in the future. The people who would eventually try to mock our marriage and diminish our partnership had no understanding of the depth and resilience they were attempting to attack. They saw only the surface presentation of professional success and personal happiness, without recognizing the strategic thinking and collaborative strength that had made both possible. The anniversary post that would trigger such dramatic consequences was neither accidental nor naive, but a deliberate expression of values we'd held since childhood and had spent our entire relationship defending and promoting. When those values came under attack, our response drew on everything we'd learned about fairness, strategy, and the power of well-organized coalitions to force systemic change. The 8-year-old girl who'd helped David document science fair corruption and the 9-year-old boy who'd taken his concerns directly to the district superintendent were still very much present in the adults who would soon face down corporate executives and industry leaders in defense of professional respect and personal dignity. Our story was far from over, but its foundation had been laid decades earlier in the suburban neighborhoods of Richardson, Texas, where two families had chosen to stand up for their children and teach them that fairness was worth fighting for, that strategic thinking could overcome initial disadvantages, and that true partnerships were built on shared values rather than convenient attraction.
These lessons would prove invaluable in the professional battles that lay ahead, and they would ultimately transform what began as an attack on our marriage into an opportunity to strengthen both our relationship and our individual careers in ways we never could have imagined when we were just neighborhood kids helping each other challenge unfair authority figures. Part 3: Professional Foundation and Early Success. The trajectory that led me to become the kind of professional who could confidently contact 3 CEOs about their employees' misconduct began during my junior year at the University of Texas at Austin, when Professor Helena Rodriguez pulled me aside after a particularly intense case study presentation and asked if I'd ever considered specializing in crisis communications and reputation management. At the time, I thought marketing meant creating clever advertisements and managing social media accounts for trendy brands. I had no idea that the analytical skills and strategic thinking I'd been developing since childhood would translate into a career spent navigating complex stakeholder relationships and corporate political dynamics. The marketing program at UT was rigorous and theoretical, emphasizing consumer psychology, market research methodologies, and brand development strategies that required both creative thinking and data-driven decision-making. But Professor Rodriguez recognized something in my approach to case studies that went beyond textbook application of marketing principles. She noted how I consistently identified stakeholder groups that other students overlooked, how I anticipated potential objections and prepared counter-arguments before presenting recommendations, and how I naturally gravitated toward solutions that created win-win outcomes rather than zero-sum competitive advantages. My first real test of these instincts came during an internship with Thomson Consulting, a mid-sized Austin firm that specialized in helping technology companies navigate regulatory challenges and public relations crises. I was supposed to be filing documents and attending meetings as a silent observer, but when their largest client faced a data breach that threatened to destroy consumer confidence and trigger federal investigations, I found myself drafted into the crisis response team due to my technical understanding and fresh perspective on stakeholder communication. The client, a financial services technology company called Secure Finance, had discovered that a sophisticated cyber attack had potentially compromised customer data for over 200,000 users. The initial response from their internal team had been defensive and legalistic, focusing on minimizing legal liability rather than addressing customer concerns and rebuilding trust. Their public statements emphasized technical explanations of their security measures and blamed external threats, while offering minimal information about impact on individual customers or concrete steps for remediation. I watched senior consultants struggle to craft messaging that would satisfy both legal requirements and public relations objectives, and I realized they were approaching the problem from the wrong direction. Instead of trying to convince stakeholders that the breach wasn't as bad as it appeared, they needed to demonstrate that the company was taking comprehensive action to prevent future incidents and protect customer interests going forward. My breakthrough contribution to the crisis response wasn't a brilliant communication strategy or creative campaign concept, but a systematic stakeholder analysis that identified 12 distinct groups with different information needs and concerns about the data breach. Existing clients who needed specific guidance about protecting their accounts, prospective customers who were evaluating whether to trust the company with their financial information, regulatory agencies that required detailed technical reporting and compliance demonstrations, industry partners who depended on Secure Finance for integrated services, investors who needed to understand financial implications and long-term viability. Each group required tailored communication that addressed their particular concerns while reinforcing consistent themes about accountability and improvement. The campaign we developed based on this analysis became a model for technology crisis communications that Thomson Consulting would use with future clients for years afterward. Instead of defensive messaging that minimized the significance of the breach, we created proactive communication that acknowledged the seriousness of the situation while demonstrating concrete steps the company was taking to exceed industry standards for data protection. For existing customers, we developed detailed guidance about account monitoring and additional security measures, along with direct access to dedicated support representatives who could address individual concerns. For prospective customers, we created transparent comparison charts showing how Secure Finance's new security protocols exceeded those of competitors, transforming a potential weakness into a competitive advantage. For regulatory agencies, we provided comprehensive technical documentation and volunteered for enhanced oversight programs that demonstrated commitment to compliance excellence. The results exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own. Customer retention rates actually improved during the 6 months following the breach, as clients appreciated the company's transparent communication and enhanced security measures. New customer acquisition returned to pre-breach levels within 4 months, faster than industry benchmarks for similar incidents. Regulatory relationships became collaborative rather than adversarial, with secure finance becoming a case study in effective corporate response to cybersecurity challenges. More importantly for my career development, the campaign caught the attention of marketing directors at several major Austin companies who began reaching out about internship and entry-level opportunities. Thomson Consulting offered me a permanent position upon graduation, but Professor Rodriguez encouraged me to consider positions that would expose me to broader marketing challenges and diverse industry contexts, rather than specializing immediately in crisis communications. The advice proved prescient when I was recruited by Pinnacle Marketing Group during campus interviews my senior year. PMG was known for taking on challenging assignments with companies that needed to rebuild their reputations or enter new markets against established competitors. Their client roster included technology startups seeking to challenge industry leaders, established companies pivoting to new business models, and organizations navigating regulatory changes that required strategic repositioning. My first assignment at PMG involved developing market entry strategies for TechNova Solutions, a renewable energy company that wanted to establish operations in Texas despite the state's historical resistance to alternative energy initiatives and the political influence of traditional oil and gas interests. The conventional marketing approach would have emphasized environmental benefits and cost savings, hoping to gradually convince consumers and businesses to consider renewable alternatives despite cultural and political obstacles. Instead, I proposed focusing on economic development and energy independence themes that aligned with Texas values while achieving the same practical outcomes as traditional environmental advocacy. We positioned renewable energy not as a challenge to Texas energy traditions, but as the next evolution of the state's leadership in energy innovation and economic opportunity. We highlighted how renewable energy projects would create jobs for workers in rural communities, generate tax revenue for local school districts, and reduce dependence on energy imports from other states and countries. The campaign required extensive coalition building with stakeholders who wouldn't normally support environmental initiatives, including rural economic development organizations, labor unions representing construction and maintenance workers, and business associations focused on energy cost management. We created talking points and policy positions that allowed these groups to advocate for renewable energy development without compromising their core constituencies or ideological frameworks. The strategy succeeded beyond our projections, with Green Tech securing development agreements for 3 major solar installations and 2 wind farms within 18 months of launching operations in Texas. More importantly, the campaign established templates for renewable energy advocacy that other companies could adapt for different regions and political contexts, generating significant new business for PMG and recognition for my ability to identify unexpected coalition opportunities. My success with Green Tech led to increasingly complex assignments that tested my skills in stakeholder management, strategic communication, and what my colleagues began calling impossible positioning challenges. I worked with a pharmaceutical company that needed to rebuild trust after safety recalls, developing community outreach programs that demonstrated renewed commitment to patient safety through partnerships with medical schools and public health organizations. I helped a major retailer navigate cultural sensitivity issues when expanding into diverse communities, creating advisory committees and local hiring initiatives that transformed potential opposition into enthusiastic support. I managed communication strategies for several technology companies facing regulatory scrutiny, turning compliance challenges into competitive advantages by demonstrating industry leadership in consumer protection and data privacy. Each assignment reinforced my conviction that most business challenges were fundamentally about relationships and communication rather than products or services. Companies succeeded when they understood their stakeholders' genuine concerns and developed solutions that addressed those concerns, while achieving business objectives. They failed when they tried to manipulate or ignore stakeholder interests in pursuit of short-term profits or market share. This philosophy shaped my approach to internal relationship building at PMG, as well as external client work. I made it a practice to understand the professional goals and personal motivations of colleagues, seeking opportunities to support their success while advancing my own career objectives. I volunteered for challenging assignments that others avoided, not out of martyrdom, but because difficult projects provided the best opportunities for learning and demonstrating capabilities that would be valuable in future roles. I also cultivated relationships with professionals at client companies, industry associations, and regulatory agencies, recognizing that today's junior analyst might become tomorrow's decision maker, and that genuine professional respect could create opportunities that wouldn't be available through formal application processes alone. These relationships proved invaluable when I began seeking increased responsibilities and advancement opportunities within PMG. By my third year with the company, I was managing multiple major accounts simultaneously and leading project teams that included consultants with more years of experience but less strategic insight into stakeholder dynamics and communication challenges. My compensation had increased dramatically, reflecting both my individual contributions and the new business that resulted from client satisfaction with campaigns I'd developed. More importantly, I'd established
reputation within Austin's business community as someone who could solve problems that others considered intractable, who could build bridges between groups that seemed fundamentally opposed, and who could deliver results that exceeded client expectations while maintaining ethical standards and professional integrity. This reputation led to speaking opportunities at industry conferences, consulting requests from companies that weren't PMG clients, and recognition from professional organizations that enhanced my visibility and credibility. The recognition culminated in my selection for the Austin Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Inches list during my fourth year at PMG, an honor that brought significant media attention and positioned me as a rising leader in the local business community. The profile that accompanied the award highlighted my work with challenging reputation management cases and my ability to find common ground between seemingly incompatible stakeholder groups. But the real validation came from David's perspective on my professional development and our evolving relationship as two ambitious individuals building careers in related but distinct industries. He'd been following my progression with admiration and pride, but also with keen understanding of the strategic thinking and relationship building skills that made my success possible. "What you've accomplished isn't just about being good at marketing," he observed during one of our regular dinners at home, where we discussed our respective career challenges and opportunities. "You figured out how to navigate complex political situations and build coalitions that other people can't even see, let alone organize. Those are leadership skills that transcend any particular industry or functional specialty." His insight proved prescient when PMG offered me a promotion to senior director level after 5 years with the company, a position that would involve business development responsibilities and strategic planning beyond individual client account management. The role represented a significant step toward eventual partnership consideration, but it also required skills in corporate relationship building and industry positioning that would test everything I'd learned about stakeholder management and strategic communication. The promotion coincided with David's own career advancement to lead architect position at TechFlow Industries, where his responsibilities had expanded from individual project development to team leadership and client relationship management. We were both entering phases of our careers where success would depend not just on technical competence, but on our ability to navigate complex organizational dynamics and represent our companies effectively in professional and social contexts. This parallel professional development strengthened our marriage in unexpected ways, as we could provide each other with insights and support that came from shared understanding of leadership challenges and workplace politics. We became even more effective as a team because we could draw on complementary perspectives about problem solving and relationship building while maintaining our individual professional identities and career ambitions. The LinkedIn post that would eventually trigger such dramatic consequences was actually a celebration of this professional partnership as much as our personal relationship. We'd both achieved significant career milestones during our 5th year of marriage, we'd established ourselves as respected leaders in our respective industries, and we'd proven that our collaborative approach to challenges enhanced rather than compromised our individual success. When I shared that anniversary photo and caption, I was expressing genuine gratitude for a partnership that had enabled both of us to reach our professional potential while building a personal relationship based on mutual respect and shared values. The post represented confidence in our achievements and optimism about our future prospects both as individuals and as a team. What I didn't anticipate was that this confidence and success would trigger resentment and hostility from people who interpreted our happiness as somehow diminishing their own accomplishments or challenging their assumptions about appropriate relationships between personal and professional identity. The attacks that followed revealed more about the attackers' insecurities and professional frustrations than about any actual problems with our marriage or my career trajectory. But my response to those attacks drew directly on everything I'd learned about stakeholder analysis, strategic communication, and coalition building during my years at PMG. I approached the situation as I would any complex reputation management challenge, identifying key decision makers, developing targeted messaging for different audiences, and leveraging relationships and credibility I'd built through years of professional excellence and ethical conduct. The people who tried to mock our marriage and diminish my professional standing had no understanding of the depth of experience and strategic thinking they were confronting. They saw only the surface presentation of success and happiness, without recognizing the systematic approach to relationship building and problem solving that had made both possible. Their attack would soon prove to be the catalyst for the most significant professional opportunity of my career, demonstrating once again that challenges often create unexpected advantages for people who know how to respond strategically rather than emotionally. The foundation I'd built through years of difficult assignments and successful outcomes would prove invaluable in the corporate battles that lay ahead, and it would ultimately transform what began as a personal attack into a platform for industry leadership and systematic change. Part 4: David's Professional Journey and Our Partnership. While I was building my reputation in marketing and strategic communications, David was establishing himself as one of Austin's most innovative software architects. Following a career path that would eventually intersect with mine in ways that neither of us anticipated when we first started our professional journeys. His approach to engineering problems reflected the same systematic thinking and fairness-focused mindset that had characterized his response to childhood injustices, but applied to technical challenges that required both creative problem-solving and collaborative leadership in increasingly complex organizational environments. David's engineering program at Texas A&M had emphasized not just technical competency but also project management and team leadership skills that many computer science programs overlooked in favor of pure coding ability. His professors recognized early that his natural inclination toward systematic analysis and solution development made him well suited for architectural roles that required understanding both technical constraints and business requirements. Translating between stakeholder groups that often had conflicting priorities and incompatible communication styles. His cooperative education assignments during college provided exposure to diverse corporate cultures and project methodologies that would prove invaluable when navigating the professional politics and stakeholder management challenges that characterized his later career. He worked for everything from nimble startups where individual initiative was essential for survival, to massive corporations where understanding bureaucratic processes and influence networks determined project success regardless of technical merit. The experience that most shaped his professional philosophy occurred during his final co-op assignment with DataCorp Solutions, a mid-sized Austin company that specialized in database integration projects for healthcare organizations. David was assigned to a team developing a patient record system that would allow multiple hospitals to share information while maintaining privacy compliance and security protocols that satisfied both federal regulations and individual institutional requirements. The technical challenges were significant, but the interpersonal dynamics proved even more complex. The healthcare organizations each insisted on different security standards and user interface designs, while the federal compliance requirements seemed to change every few months as regulatory agencies issued new guidance and interpretation documents. The DataCorp project manager had worked in the industry for 15 years, but was struggling to balance competing demands and keep the project on schedule. David's breakthrough contribution wasn't an innovative coding solution or brilliant system architecture, but a stakeholder communication framework that helped all parties understand how their individual requirements connected to shared objectives and mutual dependencies. He created visualization tools that showed how each organization's security protocols would affect system functionality for other users, helping them identify areas where compromise was possible without compromising essential protections. More importantly, he developed regular communication protocols that kept all stakeholders informed about project progress and emerging challenges, preventing the kind of last-minute requirement changes and scope expansion that typically derailed complex integration projects. His documentation and reporting systems became templates that DataCorp would use for future healthcare projects, and several client organizations requested that David be assigned to their subsequent technology initiatives. The project's success earned David recognition from both his academic supervisors and industry professionals, but more importantly, it taught him that technical excellence was meaningless without effective communication and relationship management. The most elegant software architecture would fail if stakeholders didn't understand its benefits or felt excluded from development decisions, while even mediocre technical solutions could succeed if all parties felt heard and respected throughout the implementation process. This insight shaped his approach to job selection after graduation, when he chose TechFlow Industries over larger, more prestigious companies that offered higher starting salaries but less opportunity for cross-functional collaboration and stakeholder interaction. TechFlow specialized in enterprise software solutions for companies undergoing digital transformation, work that required understanding business processes and organizational culture as much as technical architecture and coding proficiency. David's first major assignment at TechFlow involved developing inventory management systems for Henderson Manufacturing, a family-owned Austin company that had grown from local supplier to regional distributor without updating their technology infrastructure to match their expanded operations. The existing systems were a patchwork of spreadsheets, standalone databases, and manual processes that created inefficiencies and error rates that threatened customer relationships and profit margins. But the real challenge wasn't technical complexity, it was organizational resistance to change from employees who'd spent decades developing workarounds and informal systems that seemed to function adequately despite their obvious limitations. The previous software implementation had failed spectacularly when consultants tried to impose standardized processes without understanding existing workflows or involving key employees in design decisions. David spent his first month at Henderson not writing code or designing systems, but observing current processes and interviewing employees about their daily challenges and informal problem-solving strategies. He discovered that many apparent inefficiencies actually served important functions that weren't obvious to outside observers, and that employees had developed sophisticated knowledge about customer preferences and supplier relationships that needed to be preserved and enhanced rather than eliminated through automation. The system he ultimately designed incorporated these insights while addressing the technical limitations that created genuine problems for business operations. More importantly, he involved key employees in testing and refinement processes, ensuring that the final implementation would enhance rather than disrupt their ability to serve customers effectively and maintain the relationships that had driven Henderson's growth. The project's success led to additional assignments with companies facing similar digital transformation challenges, establishing David's reputation as someone who could bridge the gap between technical possibility and organizational reality. His approach became known within TechFlow as the Mitchell method, emphasizing stakeholder engagement and collaborative design processes that other engineers began requesting training to implement in their own projects. By his third year at TechFlow, David was leading multi-engineer teams on complex projects that required coordination with multiple client organizations and external vendor relationships. His responsibilities had expanded beyond individual coding and system design to include project planning, resource allocation, and client relationship management that tested his abilities in areas that engineering school had barely addressed. The challenges were often more political than technical, requiring navigation of competing departmental priorities, budget constraints, and personality conflicts that could derail even well-designed solutions if not managed carefully. David discovered that his childhood experiences with systematic problem-solving and coalition building translated directly to these professional contexts, where success depended on understanding stakeholder motivations and developing solutions that addressed underlying concerns rather than just surface requirements. His most significant professional breakthrough came during his fourth year at TechFlow, when he was assigned to lead the development team for Austin Regional Medical Center's electronic health record integration project. The hospital system was consolidating 4 previously independent facilities into a unified network that would allow patient information sharing while maintaining compliance with privacy regulations and security protocols that differed across specialties and departments. The project had already defeated 2 previous consulting teams who'd focused primarily on technical architecture without adequately addressing the workflow differences and cultural resistance that made implementation practically impossible despite theoretical feasibility. David inherited a situation where medical staff were actively hostile to further technology changes, administrators were questioning whether integration was worth the cost and disruption, and regulatory oversight had intensified due to previous implementation failures.
Instead of immediately diving into technical requirements and system specifications, David spent 6 weeks embedded within different departments, observing patient care processes and understanding how information flow affected clinical decisions and administrative responsibilities. He attended staff meetings, shadowed nurses and physicians during their shifts, and participated in quality improvement discussions that revealed the genuine inefficiencies and communication breakdowns that needed to be addressed through better technology integration. The insights he gained during this observation period fundamentally changed his approach to the project architecture and implementation timeline. Rather than trying to replace existing systems immediately with a comprehensive new platform, he developed a phased integration strategy that would allow gradual transition while preserving the workflows and information access patterns that medical staff depended on for patient care. More importantly, he created feedback mechanisms and modification procedures that would allow the system to evolve based on user experience and changing requirements, rather than locking in design decisions that might prove problematic during actual implementation. The flexibility built into his architecture became essential as federal regulations changed during the development process and hospital acquisition plans required integration with additional facilities that hadn't been part of original planning discussions. The project took 18 months to complete rather than the 12 months originally projected, but it achieved implementation success rates and user satisfaction scores that exceeded industry benchmarks for similar integration projects. More significantly, Austin Regional Medical Center began referring other healthcare organizations to TechFlow for their technology integration needs, generating substantial new business and establishing the company's reputation in the healthcare technology sector. David's leadership during the medical center project earned him promotion to senior architect position and recognition as one of Austin's rising leaders in healthcare technology innovation. But the experience also reinforced his understanding of how technical expertise needed to be combined with relationship building and stakeholder management skills to achieve meaningful impact in complex organizational environments. These professional experiences shaped our marriage in ways that strengthened both our individual careers and our collaborative partnership. We could provide each other with insights and perspectives that came from parallel but distinct experiences in managing complex stakeholder relationships and navigating organizational politics. Our dinner conversations became informal consulting sessions where we helped each other analyze challenges and develop strategies for difficult professional situations. Part 5. The Hidden Truth Setup. The foundation for what would become the LinkedIn controversy was actually laid 6 months before that anniversary post, during a series of industry networking events and professional conferences where I began to notice patterns of behavior that seemed designed to undermine my credibility and professional standing within Austin's tech community. At first, these incidents appeared isolated and coincidental, the kind of minor slights and dismissive comments that ambitious professionals might experience in any competitive environment. But as they accumulated over time, I realized I was facing a coordinated campaign of professional sabotage that targeted not just my career accomplishments but my marriage and personal relationships as well. The first incident occurred at the Austin Tech Alliance quarterly mixer held at the Fairmont Hotel downtown, an event that brought together marketing professionals, software developers, venture capitalists, and startup founders for an evening of networking and industry trend discussions. I'd attended these mixers regularly for 3 years, building relationships and sharing insights about the intersection of technology innovation and strategic communication. My contributions to panel discussions and small group conversations had earned respect from colleagues across different sectors, and I typically left these events with new business contacts and collaborative opportunities. But the October mixer felt different from the moment I arrived. Amanda Foster was standing near the registration table with Brian Tunson and Lisa Park, and their conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed me approaching. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Amanda offered a overly bright smile and a comment that seemed friendly on the surface but carried an unmistakable edge of condescension. "Sarah, how wonderful to see you here again. Still networking for David's career advancement, or are you finally pursuing some independent professional interests?" The question was phrased as though she were genuinely curious about my professional development, but the implication that my previous networking had been primarily about advancing my husband's career rather than my own was clear to everyone within earshot. I responded diplomatically, mentioning recent campaigns I'd managed and upcoming speaking engagements that demonstrated my individual professional trajectory. But as the conversation continued, it became apparent that Amanda and her colleagues had come prepared with talking points designed to diminish my accomplishments while maintaining plausible deniability about their hostile intentions. Brian chimed in with observations about how challenging it must be to establish independent credibility when married to someone in the same industry ecosystem, suggesting that potential clients might have difficulty separating my qualifications from David's reputation and connections. Lisa added comments about the importance of maintaining clear professional boundaries between personal relationships and business development, implying that my marriage somehow compromised my ability to represent clients objectively. The conversation was skillfully orchestrated to plant seeds of doubt about my professional integrity and independence without making accusations that could be directly challenged or contradicted. Other networking attendees who overheard these exchanges might reasonably conclude that my marriage created conflicts of interest or ethical complications that made me a risky choice for important projects, regardless of my actual qualifications and track record. I navigated the conversation professionally, neither escalating the confrontation nor allowing their implications to go completely unchallenged. But I left the mixer with a clear understanding that I was facing intentional reputation management challenges that went beyond typical professional competition or personality conflicts. Someone had decided that my success threatened their interests, and they were implementing a systematic campaign to undermine my standing within the professional community. The second incident occurred 3 weeks later during the Marketing Excellence Conference at the Austin Convention Center, where I was scheduled to present a case study about reputation recovery strategies for technology companies facing regulatory challenges. The presentation was based on my work with Secure Finance and several subsequent clients, demonstrating methodologies that had become templates for crisis communication across multiple industries. My presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning in one of the larger conference rooms, with an audience that included marketing directors from major Austin companies, consultants from competing firms, and academic researchers studying corporate communication strategies. I'd spent weeks preparing slides and case study materials that would provide valuable insights while protecting client confidentiality and competitive intelligence. But when I arrived at the conference room 30 minutes before my scheduled start time, I discovered that someone had submitted last-minute changes to the program that moved my presentation to a smaller breakout room, while promoting a competing session about social media marketing trends to the main venue. The conference organizers explained that the changes had been requested by several attendees who felt that social media trends would have broader appeal than crisis communication case studies. The modification meant that my audience would be significantly smaller and would consist primarily of junior-level professionals rather than the senior executives and industry leaders who could benefit most from my insights and potentially become future clients or collaborators. More importantly, the change had been made without consulting me and without providing opportunity to object or request alternative accommodations. I learned later that Amanda Foster had been instrumental in organizing the attendee requests that triggered the program changes, leveraging her connections with conference sponsors and organizing committee members to justify the modifications as responsiveness to participant preferences, rather than deliberate sabotage of my presentation opportunity. The presentation itself went well despite the reduced audience and suboptimal venue, but the incident demonstrated that my professional adversaries were willing to use industry relationships and organizational influence to limit my visibility and impact within the broader marketing community. They weren't content to simply ignore my accomplishments or avoid collaborating with me, they were actively working to reduce my opportunities for recognition and business development. The third incident was the most personally invasive and professionally damaging, occurring during a client dinner at Jeffrey's restaurant, where I was hosting executives from a potential new account alongside Tom Williams, my supervisor at Pinnacle Marketing Group. The client, Meridian Financial Services, was considering a major reputation management campaign following regulatory settlements that had created public relations challenges and customer confidence issues. The dinner was proceeding smoothly, with productive discussions about campaign strategies and timeline requirements that suggested we were likely to win the account despite competition from several larger consulting firms. The Meridian executives seemed impressed with our case study examples and strategic recommendations, and Tom was already discussing project management details and resource allocation plans. But midway through the main course, Brian Thompson appeared at our table with what he claimed was a coincidental encounter, while dining with his own clients at a nearby table. His interruption was presented as a friendly greeting and professional courtesy, but his conversation quickly turned to questions about my background and qualifications that seemed designed to raise doubts about my expertise and experience. "Sarah's done some interesting work in crisis communications," he told the Meridian executives with a tone that suggested faint praise covering significant reservations. though I imagine it can be challenging to maintain objectivity when your husband works so closely with many of the same companies and industry players. The Austin tech community is pretty interconnected, and conflicts of interest can develop in unexpected ways. The comment was devastating precisely because it contained elements of truth that made it difficult to refute directly. David did work with technology companies that might occasionally intersect with my client base, and Austin's professional community was indeed closely networked in ways that could create potential complications. But Brian's suggestion that these connections compromised my professional judgment or created ethical problems was baseless and malicious. Tom attempted to redirect the conversation toward my qualifications and track record, but the damage had been done. The Meridian executives became noticeably more reserved for the remainder of the dinner, asking questions about potential conflicts of interest and requesting additional references that hadn't been part of their original evaluation criteria. We ultimately lost the account to a firm with less relevant experience, but fewer perceived complications related to local industry relationships. The pattern that emerged from these incidents was clear and sophisticated, targeting different aspects of my professional reputation through carefully
coordinated attacks that maintained plausible deniability while systematically undermining my credibility and business prospects. Amanda, Brian, and Lisa weren't acting independently or spontaneously, they were implementing a coordinated strategy designed to isolate me professionally and limit my influence within Austin's marketing and technology communities. But understanding their strategy was only the first step toward developing an effective response. I needed to determine what had motivated this campaign, why they considered my success threatening enough to justify systematic sabotage, and what vulnerabilities they might have that could be exploited if direct confrontation became necessary. The research I conducted over the following weeks revealed a complex web of professional jealousies, romantic entanglements, and business failures that explained both the motivation for their attacks and the coordination of their efforts. Amanda Foster had been passed over for promotion twice at TechNova Solutions, with both positions going to colleagues who'd worked with companies that I'd helped with successful reputation management campaigns. Her supervisors had explicitly mentioned the positive industry buzz around firms that could deliver measurable results in crisis situations, making her feel that my professional success was directly limiting her advancement opportunities. Brian Thompson's hostility stemmed from different sources but led to similar resentment about my visibility and influence within the local business community. His consulting practice at Digital Dynamics had struggled to win major accounts, particularly in situations where companies needed sophisticated stakeholder management and strategic communication beyond basic marketing services. Several potential clients had specifically mentioned my work as the standard they expected consultants to meet, creating competitive pressures that Brian felt unable to match with his more traditional skill set. Lisa Park's involvement was the most personal and vindictive, rooted in romantic complications that had occurred before my marriage but continued to influence her professional behavior years later. She dated David briefly during college, a relationship that ended when he met me and realized our partnership offered intellectual and emotional compatibility that he hadn't experienced with previous girlfriends. Lisa had never fully accepted that rejection, and she interpreted my professional success as further evidence that I'd somehow stolen opportunities and relationships that should have been hers. Together, these three individuals had formed an informal alliance based on shared resentment and mutual benefit from efforts to diminish my professional standing. They coordinated their attendance at industry events to maximize opportunities for strategic undermining, shared intelligence about my client projects and business development efforts, and provided mutual support for attacks that any one of them would have been reluctant to launch independently. More troubling was their success in recruiting additional participants for their campaign, including colleagues and competitors who didn't necessarily harbor personal grudges against me but were willing to participate in professional sabotage if it advanced their own interests or eliminated a perceived threat to their market positions. The network they'd built included marketing professionals who competed with Pinnacle Marketing Group for clients, technology industry insiders who resented external consultants gaining influence within their community, and social climbers who thought aligning with established professionals like Amanda and Brian would enhance their own networking prospects. The sophistication of their approach suggested that they'd studied my professional background and business development strategies carefully, identifying specific vulnerabilities and pressure points that could be exploited without creating obvious legal liability or triggering direct retaliation. They understood that professional reputation was built slowly through accumulated relationships and demonstrated competence, but could be damaged quickly through strategic placement of doubts and questions about integrity, objectivity, and qualifications. What they hadn't anticipated was that I'd learned to recognize and respond to systematic attacks through my work helping clients navigate similar challenges, and that I had access to research methodologies and strategic communication tools that could be applied to my own reputation defense. More importantly, they'd underestimated the strength of my relationship with David and our shared commitment to mutual support when facing external threats to our individual or collective success. The LinkedIn anniversary post that would eventually trigger their public attack wasn't accidental or naive, it was a deliberate test of their willingness to escalate from private professional sabotage to public personal attack. I'd grown tired of their behind-the-scenes campaign and wanted to force them into more overt behavior that would be easier to document and respond to through formal channels. The post was crafted to celebrate genuine achievements and happiness while simultaneously presenting an irresistible target for people who'd spent months trying to undermine my professional credibility by attacking my marriage and personal relationships. I knew that Amanda, Brian, and Lisa wouldn't be able to resist commenting publicly on content that so directly contradicted their narrative about my relationship being a professional liability rather than a personal asset. What I didn't fully anticipate was how quickly their public comments would reveal the extent of their network and the depth of their hostility, or how their obvious coordination would make it impossible for them to maintain plausible deniability about their systematic campaign against my reputation. Their LinkedIn attacks would provide the documentation and evidence I needed to escalate from defensive responses to proactive accountability measures that would ultimately transform the entire dynamic of our professional conflict. The anniversary post was designed to be a turning point, but I expected the turn to involve gradual exposure of their behavior through careful documentation and strategic relationship building. Instead, it would trigger an immediate crisis that required rapid escalation to corporate leadership and industry-wide conversations about professional conduct standards that I hadn't originally planned to initiate. But the foundation for that escalation had been carefully laid through months of research, relationship building, and strategic preparation that would prove essential when the conflict moved from private sabotage to public confrontation. The people who thought they were systematically destroying my career were actually providing me with the motivation and evidence I needed to fundamentally change industry standards for professional behavior and accountability. Their attacks on my marriage and personal relationships would ultimately demonstrate the strength and strategic value of the partnership they'd tried so hard to portray as a professional weakness. David and I had spent years developing complementary skills and mutual support systems that would prove invaluable when facing coordinated opposition from multiple adversaries across different companies and professional networks. The hidden truth they were about to expose wasn't about my marriage or professional qualifications but about their own willingness to engage in systematic harassment and their employers' lack of awareness about what their employees were doing under corporate banners on professional platforms. The accountability they would soon face would reshape Austin's business community standards and create new models for addressing workplace harassment that extended beyond traditional office environments into digital networking spaces. The anniversary post was just the beginning of a confrontation that had been building for months, but which would ultimately provide opportunities for industry leadership and systematic change that none of us could have anticipated when the first professional sabotage began 6 months earlier. The hidden truth was about to become very public indeed, but not in the way that any of the participants had originally intended. Part 6: The Inciting Incident, the Anniversary Post-Attack. The morning I decided to share our anniversary celebration on LinkedIn started like any other Tuesday in March, with coffee brewing in our kitchen while I reviewed client campaign metrics and prepared for a strategy meeting with Pinnacle Marketing Group's newest account. David had already left for TechFlow Industries, where he was leading the final testing phase of a complex database integration project that had consumed most of his attention for the past 6 weeks. We'd managed to carve out Monday evening for our actual anniversary dinner despite our demanding schedules, choosing Uchi because it represented the perfect intersection of sophisticated cuisine and intimate atmosphere that characterized our approach to celebrating important milestones. The photograph I ultimately shared captured us at our corner table during sunset, champagne glasses raised in a toast while downtown Austin's skyline provided a backdrop that seemed to symbolize our shared commitment to building something meaningful together in this city we'd come to love. David's expression showed the genuine happiness and pride that had characterized our entire relationship, while my own face reflected the contentment and confidence that came from 5 years of proving we could weather professional challenges and personal growth while maintaining our individual identities and collaborative partnership. I crafted the caption carefully, balancing professional authenticity with personal warmth in a way that reflected how our marriage enhanced rather than complicated our respective careers. 5 years of building dreams together, supporting each other's ambitions, and proving that true partnership multiplies individual success rather than limiting it. Grateful for a marriage that makes both of us stronger leaders, better professionals, and more complete human beings. Here's to the next chapter of adventures, achievements, and shared victories. The post included strategic hashtags that positioned our relationship within broader conversations about work-life integration, professional partnership, and the evolving definitions of success in Austin's business community. I wasn't naive about the potential for criticism or negative reactions, particularly given the months of professional sabotage I'd been documenting and analyzing. But I was curious to see whether Amanda Foster, Brian Thompson, and Lisa Park would escalate from private undermining to public attack when presented with such an obvious target for their systematic campaign against my reputation. The initial responses exceeded my expectations for both positive engagement and hostile reaction, confirming that the post had achieved its intended purpose of forcing previously hidden conflicts into public visibility where they could be documented and addressed through appropriate channels. Colleagues from Pinnacle Marketing Group offered congratulations and supportive comments that demonstrated the respect I'd earned through years of successful client work and collaborative relationship building. David's engineering colleagues shared their own stories about balancing demanding careers with strong marriages, creating a thread of authentic professional conversation about work-life integration challenges and solutions. But within 2 hours, the comment section had become a battleground that revealed the full extent and coordination of the opposition campaign I'd been tracking for months. Amanda Foster fired the opening shot with surgical precision designed to question my professionalism while maintaining plausible deniability about her hostile intentions. So sweet that some people still believe in fairy tales. I suppose everyone needs their illusions to get through the day. The comment was accompanied by laughing emojis that transformed what might have been interpreted as good-natured teasing into obvious mockery. Brian Thompson followed immediately with escalation that made the attack more explicit while still avoiding language that could be characterized as overtly harassing or unprofessional. David's really committed to the bit, isn't he? Amazing what some people will do for social media content. His comment accumulated likes from several mutual connections within minutes, suggesting coordinated timing and preparation rather than spontaneous reaction to my post. Lisa Park delivered the most personally targeted attack, directly questioning my motivation for sharing professional content on LinkedIn while implying that my marriage was somehow inappropriate subject matter for business networking platforms. Some people will do anything for attention these days. Marriage posts on LinkedIn, really? There are other platforms for personal content, but I guess some people need to make everything about themselves. The speed and coordination of these initial attacks made it clear that they'd been monitoring my social media activity and planning their response strategy in advance. But what surprised me was how quickly their coordinated assault attracted additional participants who either shared their hostility toward my success or simply enjoyed participating in public criticism of someone they perceived as pretentious or self-promotional. The pile-on effect developed rapidly as other professionals who'd been influenced by months of private disparagement saw an opportunity to express their resentment publicly without appearing to initiate hostility themselves. Comments questioning my judgment, my professionalism, and my motivation for sharing personal content on business platforms began accumulating faster than supportive responses from genuine colleagues and friends. But the attack that crossed the line from professional criticism to personal assault came from Amanda Foster again, demonstrating her willingness to escalate beyond strategic reputation management into territory that would prove legally and professionally problematic for her and her employers. Poor Sarah, posting marriage content on a professional platform because she can't make it about her actual work. Some people peak in their personal lives when their careers stall out. We've all seen the type. This comment was devastating precisely because it contained multiple false implications presented as established facts that other readers might accept without investigation.
The suggestion that my career had stalled was contradicted by objective measures of professional success and business growth, but casual observers might assume Amanda had inside information that justified her confident assertions. Her reference to "we've all seen the type" implied widespread professional consensus about my limitations and failures, creating peer pressure for others to join the criticism or risk appearing uninformed about community standards. More troubling was how quickly the comment accumulated likes and supportive responses from people I recognized as professional contacts and potential collaborators. Watching real-time erosion of my reputation among people who'd previously treated me with respect and consideration was both personally devastating and professionally terrifying, particularly given how much of my business development depended on networking relationships and word-of-mouth referrals. The afternoon became a blur of notifications and messages as the post continued gaining visibility and attracting commentary from across Austin's interconnected business community. Some colleagues reached out privately to offer support and express shock at the hostile tone of the public criticism, while others sent screenshots and warnings about additional negative comments being posted on other platforms and in private group discussions. Jessica Chen called around 3 o'clock with a mixture of concern and admiration for what she correctly identified as a calculated risk that was producing more dramatic results than either of us had anticipated. "Girl, I know you saw this coming, but are you prepared for how big this is getting? People are choosing sides and it's getting personal fast. Some of these comments are borderline harassment, and the companies these people work for probably have no idea what their employees are doing under their corporate banners." Her observation about corporate liability was the insight I'd been waiting for someone to articulate, confirming my suspicion that the attacks had created legal and reputational exposure for TechNova Solutions' digital dynamics, and innovate tech that their leadership would find unacceptable once they became aware of the situation. The attackers had made the strategic error of using their professional identities and corporate affiliations to launch personal attacks, creating direct connections between their harassment and their employers' brands that couldn't be dismissed as private behavior unrelated to workplace conduct. By late afternoon, the post had accumulated over 300 views and 47 comments, with the negative responses significantly outnumbering positive ones in ways that would influence how casual observers interpreted both the original content and the broader professional consensus about my character and qualifications. The viral nature of the controversy was generating visibility that extended far beyond my immediate network, potentially affecting business relationships and opportunities that I hadn't even considered when deciding to test my adversary's willingness to escalate from private sabotage to public attack. But the most personally painful aspect of the entire experience was watching David's professional relationships become collateral damage in a conflict that had originated with people who resented my success rather than his. Several of his colleagues at TechFlow Industries and industry contacts from various Austin companies were participating in the criticism, either directly through their own comments or indirectly through likes and shares that amplified the negative messaging. When David finally saw the LinkedIn disaster around 5 o'clock, his initial reaction was protective anger toward the people attacking me, followed by genuine confusion about why his professional connections had chosen to participate in systematic harassment of his wife rather than addressing any concerns privately if they genuinely believed my behavior was inappropriate or unprofessional. "I had no idea they felt this way about you," he said when he called from his office after reviewing the comment thread and cross-referencing the participants with his own professional network. "Some of these people have worked with me on major projects, have been to our house for dinner parties, have seemed genuinely supportive of our relationship when we've interacted at industry events. I never would have expected them to participate in something like this." His shock was understandable given how successfully our adversaries had maintained their facade of professional courtesy during face-to-face interactions while conducting their systematic campaign through private channels and strategic manipulation of networking opportunities. But it also revealed how much of their hostility had been directed specifically at me rather than our marriage generally, and how carefully they'd avoided allowing David to witness or understand the extent of their professional sabotage. The evening brought additional developments that confirmed my suspicion that the LinkedIn attacks were part of a broader coordinated effort that extended beyond social media criticism into more serious forms of professional interference and business disruption. Tom Williams from Pinnacle Marketing Group called around 7 o'clock to inform me that 2 prospective clients had contacted him during the afternoon to express concerns about my social media judgment and ask whether the company planned to address what they characterized as unprofessional behavior by senior staff. The inquiries had been prompted by calls from individuals who identified themselves as concerned industry colleagues sharing information about potential reputation risks associated with my recent online activity. Tom hadn't been able to determine who had initiated these calls or what specific concerns they'd raised, but the timing suggested coordinated effort to damage my business relationships while the LinkedIn controversy was generating maximum visibility and negative attention. More seriously, Jessica Chen reported that her HR contacts at several major Austin companies had been asked about my professional background and any potential red flags that might affect collaboration decisions, suggesting that the attack network was actively working to limit my future business opportunities through private relationship manipulation in addition to public reputation assault. The scope and sophistication of the coordinated campaign became clear as David and I spent the evening documenting connections between the LinkedIn attackers and the broader network of individuals who'd been systematically undermining my professional standing for months. The anniversary post had served as a catalyst that forced their private campaign into public visibility, but it had also triggered escalation that threatened to cause permanent damage to my career and business relationships if not addressed decisively. The decision to contact corporate leadership at TechNova Solutions, Digital Dynamics, and Innovate Tech wasn't driven by revenge or emotional reaction to the public humiliation, but by strategic recognition that the attack had created legal and reputational exposure for these companies that their executives would need to address to protect their own interests and corporate brands. The attackers had made the fatal error of conducting systematic harassment while prominently displaying their corporate affiliations and using their professional credibility to lend weight to their character assassination efforts. They'd transformed a personal dispute into a corporate liability issue that would require executive attention and formal response regardless of the underlying merits of their complaints about my social media activity or professional conduct. But more importantly, they demonstrated that Austin's business community lacked adequate standards and enforcement mechanisms for addressing professional harassment that occurred on networking platforms rather than in traditional workplace environments. The accountability they would soon face would create precedents and procedures that would benefit other professionals who faced similar systematic campaigns designed to limit their career advancement and business opportunities. The LinkedIn post that had triggered such dramatic consequences was never intended to be simply a celebration of personal happiness, but a strategic test of opposition willingness to escalate from private sabotage to public attack. The results had exceeded my expectations for both the scope of the coordinated response and the evidence it provided about systemic problems that extended far beyond individual personality conflicts or professional competition. The foundation had been laid for accountability measures that would reshape industry standards and create new models for addressing workplace harassment in the digital age. But the immediate challenge was managing the crisis that had been triggered by forcing these hidden conflicts into public visibility where they could be documented and addressed through appropriate channels. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.